let's start our allegorical breakdown of Matrix 4 Resurrections Decoded. So here we go. I'm going to bring my show notes up onto the screen briefly here, so I have them ready to go. Now, the first thing about this film that people have to understand is that it is, in fact, a spiritual allegory. And a lot of people don't understand what that means when it is said. This movie was put out around Christmas time, just before Christmas of 2021, by Lana Wachowski, one of the Wachowski siblings. Lily Wachowski did not take part in the making of this film. But she is the one who has chimed in on saying what she thinks it is about, and I think that she is completely incorrect, and that Lana Wachowski may be the individual who really understands, what this movie is really made to, the tale it is really made to tell in people's minds. I'll be talking about that a little bit later when I talk about some people's, from their agenda point of view, their incorrect analysis of this film. So that being said, I want to review a little bit of what I did in the first Matrix trilogy breakdown that I gave, which is honestly, aside from my natural law series of presentations, my natural law seminar, it's probably my most popular material online is the Matrix trilogy decoded. So I gave this back in, I believe it was 2011. Or it might have been 2012. Anyway, it was I think it was 2012. It was a breakdown of, no, actually I think it was 2011 now that I think about it. I don't have the exact date handy, but it was part of one of the fundraisers that we did for, I think it was the Free Your Mind 2 conference. And basically, what I did in this presentation was I broke down all three of the Matrix movies quickly. I'm going to do it in an extended form here, where I will be covering the first half of this film right up to the 50% mark this week, and then next week I'll be covering the second half of it. In this original breakdown of the allegory of the trilogy, films 1, 2, and 3, I explained that these films have to be seen as allegorical creations. So I'm just going to briefly review a few things that I covered about the films that's going to be completely connected to what I talk about the fourth film. So that was the cover of my presentation that is available in What on Earth is Happening donation gifts on my website on flash drive and DVD. And in that presentation, Matrix Trilogy Decoded, I talked about the three films as spiritual allegories. What an allegory is, this is the definition of the word allegory for those who may not be familiar with it, but everyone should be by this point. A story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. Now, almost always a true allegory from a philosophical and spiritual perspective is trying to teach a moral lesson. That's one of the first things that has to be understood here. And just like the Matrix trilogy, the first three movies were spiritual allegories. It's no different. Matrix 4 is teaching a spiritual lesson in a veiled way, and some would say in a not so veiled way. The writer and director is pretty out in the open with the dialogue that comes out of the characters about what's going on in our world. So if you're not familiar with allegory as a concept in art, become familiar with it and understand that all of the Matrix franchise films are in fact spiritual allegories. So in the first part of, in my presentation breakdown of the first three movies of the trilogy, I explained that the protagonists, the heroes of these three films in the trilogy, are in fact representative and symbolic of the three aspects of human consciousness. And this is material that we covered very, very early on in What on Earth is Happening broadcasts. So we see that human consciousness can be expressed essentially in three ways: thought, emotion, and action. And each one of the heroes in these films represent one of the aspects of human consciousness fully. Morpheus, the person who originally wakes up from the Matrix illusion and helps others to awaken and get them out of the Matrix, represents thought. And the coming to fruition of our thoughts is the attainment of knowledge. And having a deep understanding of what is taking place within us and around us, which is the essence of overall consciousness, and the basis for holistic intelligence. And that is who Morpheus represents throughout these films. Trinity, on the other hand, is the sacred feminine aspect of consciousness, our emotions, the internal heart-based intelligence that we can express. And the fruition or, attainment of our emotional intelligence is true care or true love. Okay, not in the sense of purely romantic or even brotherly love, but we're talking about higher level care, what I call true care, which is care for truth, care for freedom, care for justice, care for the freedom of everyone in this world, okay? And that is true agape love, agape-based love, okay? It is love of truth and love of freedom for all, not just self-identified care or love in personal relationships or even from a brotherly love perspective, a platonic form of love. This is wider extended love in a higher form of consciousness, based in higher consciousness. So that is who Trinity represents throughout these films. And of course, Neo is the third aspect of consciousness that is action. And his character represents being based in right action, doing the right thing because of what you have come to know, the intelligence, the true holistic intelligence you have gained, and attaining a state of true care, of true love. So the Neo character represents right action. He represents willpower, persistence, powering through, never giving up. He is the sacred masculine aspect of consciousness, our will to take right action. So these three characters represent the things that we need to obtain. Just like if you break down other allegories like the Wizard of Oz, as I did in another presentation, the characters were represented, thought was represented by the Scarecrow, who wanted a brain, he wanted intelligence, right? Then the emotion was based in the Tin Man, who wanted a heart, he wanted true care. And then action was represented by the Cowardly Lion, who didn't have the courage to act and wanted bravery, wanted, courage to do the right thing. All brought together by the spirit aspect, which was Dorothy, led by her spirit guide Toto. So we see these motifs of consciousness repeated over and over again in spiritual allegories of many different kinds. The Matrix is no different. And, if you want a breakdown of the first three films, you could check out my presentation, The Matrix Trilogy Decoded, where I explain this. Just wanted to reiterate it here as we move forward because it's very apropos to what we're going to be talking about. The other thing I covered in this original presentation on the trilogy was that each movie in the trilogy answers a question. It presents a question and it answers it within the confines of the movie as the movie progresses. The first movie asks and answers the question, what is the Matrix? So the Matrix concept is an allegorical concept representing something in real life. And this movie, the whole purpose of the first film is to ask the question, what are we really talking about symbolically, allegorically, philosophically, when we talk about the Matrix in this film? And that is the whole purpose of the film. The unfolding of the film is so that people understand what is the Matrix we are all actually living in the real world. And it answers the question, what is the Matrix? The Matrix is control. Specifically, the Matrix is mind control that holds people in a state of illusion. So in the construct that Morpheus takes the Neo character into, he actually answers. He asks and answers the question, what is the Matrix? As he's holding the battery, control. Okay, and it's actually mind control, because he's explaining that the machines create this artificial reality, hold humans in it in a state of mind control, and as a result, they use them as a power source, okay, as their quote-unquote food, their energy that powers the machine world. And the machine represents that control. It represents the whole system of control and slavery. The Matrix is control. Specifically, it is mind control, leading to the ultimate fruition of that control, which is the state of human slavery, the current human condition that we all find ourselves in our very real world. So that is what the first film asks and answers. The second film in the trilogy has its own question and goes on to answer it. And the second movie both asks and answers the question, why are we in the Matrix? What led us to the current human condition of control and slavery and mind control? What put us in this position? How did we get here? How did we arrive here? Why do we find ourselves in this position in life? And the second movie goes on, Matrix Reloaded, goes on to answer that question. Why are we in it? Why are we in the Matrix? Because we do not understand the laws of causality. Causality led us to this. Every action having an equal and opposite reaction, okay? Or in this case, it has a related reaction, okay? That's how karma works. We don't understand natural law and how it works. We don't understand objective morality. We don't understand the law of freedom. We don't understand how karma really works. We have these erroneous conceptions of morality and these erroneous conceptions of karma. And that is why we're in the Matrix. We have failed to understand the law of freedom, that as aggregate or collective human morality increases, collective or aggregate human freedom increases. The law of freedom is that freedom and morality are directly proportional in the aggregate. As more people in any given state of civilization become more moral, understand objective morality more completely, and align their behavior to it so that they willfully choose right behavior over wrong behavior as a species in the aggregate, that society, that civilization collectively in the aggregate becomes more free. And as they do the opposite, as they ignore objective morality and they ignore the laws of natural law, the laws of karma, the laws of spirituality, the laws of causality, of cause and effect, and they become more immoral in the aggregate from a true objective morality perspective, okay, not a religious one, from the actual laws of morality that are inherent to creation itself, then that society becomes more and more enslaved and loses its freedom. The law of freedom is very simple. Morality and freedom are directly proportional. A society that ignores objective morality can never be free. And if a society wants to be free, it must obey the laws of objective morality, which are the spiritual, natural laws of the universe, put into effect by the creator of the universe, not by man, not by humanity, not by humankind. That is what the second film asks and answers. Why are we in the Matrix? We don't understand the laws of causality, the laws of cause and effect. We don't understand natural law, period. The third film goes on to ask and answer the question, how do we get out of the Matrix? This is the whole purpose of Matrix Revolutions, Part 3 in the trilogy. So what do we need to do? What characteristics do we need to develop to get out of the Matrix personally? And this is all about willpower, persistence, and sacrifice. Not only do we need knowledge and care, but we have to engage that through right action. We have to put that out into the world, back out into the world through right action. People think, oh, it's only knowing about it and then changing our emotions to feel good or care. That's all new age nonsense. It doesn't matter how much you know or care. If you don't take action, nothing's going to change in the real world for the better. It's all about using what you have come to understand, your holistic intelligence, and letting care, the sacred feminine dynamic, drive the sacred masculine dynamic of right action and willpower. So, what does Neo have to do when he makes a personal sacrifice of himself to free the humans living in Zion from the control of the machines, or at least the war that they are prosecuting against the humans in the city of Zion? He has to sacrifice himself. He has to literally sacrifice his physical self to be inserted back into the Matrix to fight the Smith character, and he eventually dies at the end of that film, giving himself over so that he could essentially absorb the Smith character and defeat the program that way, so that the machines can continue the Matrix and have a source, or with the humans that are still connected to it, and have a source of energy. That's the bargain he makes with the machines, as I'll reiterate in a moment. But that is how you get out of the Matrix. That's what's explained. You need willpower, you need persistence, and you need the willingness to make personal sacrifice in your own life. Things that many people do not engage in, unfortunately, in the real world, and that's why we're still in the Matrix. We're still in this human condition of slavery. So continuing on, starting the analysis of the fourth film from a spiritual allegory perspective, one of the things we have to understand is how the third film ended. And that was with Neo going to the Machine City, essentially being given Captain Niobe's hover ship called the Logos, and going with Trinity into the Machine City, where they crash land and Trinity dies, or allegedly dies. We believe her to die. And Neo progressing into the Machine City, where he encounters the heart of it, and the heart of it is called Deus Ex Machina, which we'll see in the next slide. And he allows them to insert him into the Matrix, where he fights the Smith character endlessly with this, supernatural aspect of willpower that he seems to have as the one. And he is eventually again absorbed by the Smith character, which allows him to go into that code and ultimately defeat it from running rampant in the Matrix, fulfilling his bargain with the machines, that if he did that for them so that the Smith character could not continue to replicate as a virus within the Matrix, thus overwhelming it and making the machines no longer be able to have the Matrix as a source of energy, the machines would stop warring on the city of Zion. And Neo fulfills that bargain with the machines, and the machines do stop their war against Zion at the end of the third film, fulfilling their aspect of the bargain. So clearly, Neo is seen as a Christ figure in Matrix 3. Throughout the whole film franchise, he's a Christ figure, one who is willing to sacrifice himself for the good of others. It's in biblical allegory, and this is continuing it in a science fiction allegory. You can clearly see he's referenced as a Christ figure. You don't have to see this from a biblical perspective. It is simply that he is, in spiritual allegory, one who is willing to sacrifice himself so that others may continue and progress and prosper. That level of personal commitment and dedication and persistence and sacrifice he is willing to make shows him as a Christ-like figure in Christ consciousness. So you even see the cross on his chest in the slide, and he's in a position with his arms outstretched, similar to a position of crucifixion. So he is crucified, within the Matrix code, becoming the Christ figure who sacrifices himself for the good of others. Very clearly Christian allegory inserted into the Matrix film as well. So, as I said, the film ends with Deus Ex Machina, the heart of the Machine City, depicted there by this huge machine with these tendrils like an octopus, laying Neo's lifeless body down after they, he basically fulfills his bargain of defeating the Smith virus, the Agent Smith virus in the Matrix. So we assume that Neo is dead as well as Trinity is dead, and those characters are, simply have died in their sacrifice for the other human beings in the city of Zion and elsewhere. However, of course, if they're going to make a fourth film in the franchise, that's not the case. They're going to bring these characters back to life somehow. So obviously, at some point, the machines reclaim their bodies, repair them, and reinsert them into the Matrix, as we're going to see is exactly what occurs. Again, one of the things I want to say before I move on, and I should have said it already, is that this breakdown and analysis will have total spoilers. So if you have not yet watched Matrix 4 Resurrections, you don't want to listen to this whole breakdown, because I will be going through the plot of the movie, essentially, and there will be total spoilers involved in my analysis of this film. So if you haven't watched it, be warned, there are spoilers coming. Watch the film first and then go back to my analysis is what I would recommend. All right, that being said, let's move on and start with how the film begins. So the movie opens with some cryptic computer screen information. And, one of the things I want to say about what I did here with my slides that I didn't do last Sunday or this past Sunday is I enhanced them a little bit, put a background on them. I took it as an opportunity to add an introductory section explaining the allegory and analysis of the first trilogy as, a breakdown of consciousness in the main characters, because I was a little bit upset, obviously, about having to re-record the show. And I wanted to just enhance it a little bit and see it as an opportunity to even make it a little bit better. So hopefully people like the way that I am presenting the frames of the movie here within my presentation window. So the movie opens with this cryptic computer information on the screen regarding what is called a modal. Okay, so we don't yet know what the modal is, right? But it says there's been a breach of this quote-unquote modal. Now, what we're going to subsequently learn is that what a modal is it's like a simulation within another simulation. It is actually, as we learn very shortly thereafter, it's a small game running inside of another video game. Okay, so a modal dialog box is usually it's a window that comes up within another program. That's in computing terminology. That's what modal means. Now, this modal is going to be central to the plot of the film, and understanding who programmed the modal and why they programmed the modal is a central plot aspect. So we're seeing here that this modal has been created. Okay, we're going to find out it's a game within a game, or a game sequence within a larger game, and it has been breached. There is some type of a hack into this modal sub-game, okay? And we don't know much more about it at this point. What we then do, what the film proceeds to do, is it takes us inside that modal window, the game within a game, okay? And we then see some action starting to take place. So inside the modal subgame, we see, again, a repeat of what we saw at the beginning of the first film of the franchise, Matrix 1, the Heart of the City Hotel, the heart of the city. And this is clearly a reference to the heart, care, love, the sacred feminine aspect of consciousness. And now, who is inside the Heart of the City Hotel? The emotion or heart or care or love character, Trinity. Okay, again, the very name is a reference to the three aspects of consciousness. Okay, and she is in the Heart of the City Hotel. Now, this frame here is not a full frame from the movie. It is a crudely stitched version of it, because the camera comes down and shows you the sign on the side of the building that says Heart of the City Hotel. I made a very crude stitch from several frames here just to show the entirety of the sign. Okay? And they're showing that the E is out of the sign, meaning that something is not right with the heart. Okay, something isn't fully there, fully activated, fully online with emotions, that there is a disconnect, okay, in the heart, in care. Okay, getting the whole flavor of the spiritual allegory. They're breaking the E in the heart, and the E is the first letter of emotion. Okay, so that's offline, that's missing. And that is indeed part of the allegory, that the care aspect is captured, or it is not sufficient. That's why things aren't changing for the better in our world and are in fact getting worse and worse. So that is fully expressed and confirmed by the fact that inside this new modal aspect of the first part of the Matrix trilogy, Trinity is actually captured by the agents, okay? So agents, including a new actor playing Agent Smith, go into the heart of the City Hotel to attempt to attack and apprehend Trinity. And a different outcome plays out than what we saw in the first Matrix. In the first Matrix, Trinity runs from the Matrix and does escape them, getting back into the real world. However, in this incarnation of the film Matrix 4, Trinity attempts to run from the agents, okay, but including the new Agent Smith, but she is captured by them instead. And this is a totally different outcome than we expect. We then see that within the modal, presumably the person who hacked the modal, later in the film confirmed as the person who hacked the modal, we then see this new character, Bugs. They're depicted on the right of this frame with her operator from her hovercraft, Sequoia. His short name is Seek. And clearly they both have, they're watching the events unfold in this modal, this little sub-game within a game. And clearly they both have names that represent computer terminology, okay? The word Bugs, as she herself is going to say in her dialogue, is a reference to either Bugs Bunny, and she has a carrot on her shirt, and they make a little bit of comic reference regarding that. Even later on in the film, she says the phrase, "What's up, Doc?" to the ship's doctor, the hover ship's doctor, which we'll talk about later. But she says herself that it's a bug is a piece of technology that listens, as in espionage equipment, as in spying equipment, and she's spying in on this modal. So also a bug is a problem in code that creates a problem in a program, and she could be a problem in the Matrix, right? She's a bug in the Matrix. So, or she represents something that creates problems in programming, bugs. Okay, and then Sequoia, because he talks about his father loved sequoia trees, very large trees. But seek is actually a computer terminology representing seek time on a hard drive, something that goes and finds information that is needed very quickly. And indeed, that is what an operator on the hovercraft hacking into the Matrix code, in fact, does. Finds information quickly, looks for exits from the Matrix quickly, seeking things. So it's a perfect, correspondence to his function as an operator, his name. So what I'm going to do is start breaking down scenes from a perspective of important dialogue between the characters in the scene. Okay, so what happens here is, when Bugs is looking at the events unfolding and realizing this isn't how it went down in the first episode of the trilogy, and in this case, the trilogy was a game. And we're going to find out within the Matrix, the second incarnation of the Matrix, there is a series of games called the Matrix. Of course, we'll find out that Thomas Anderson, in fact, codes the games because he's been reinserted into the Matrix, and the Matrix is trying to portray him as a game developer. But we'll get to that in a moment. The Bugs character realizes this isn't how it went down in the original Matrix trilogy, and Trinity's not supposed to get captured. Okay? So when she's talking with her operator Seek about this, agents attack Bugs. They realize she's watching in on this dialogue in the modal, and they attack her. Okay, so she starts running away from them, and that's the next frame that I have here, a blow up of it. And I want to say before I even continue that a couple of things. Some of these will be not full frames. They will be blow-ups and enhancements. I did, in fact, enhance every frame that I'm going to present here, every image, for the reason that I feel that the movie, when it was filmed, is filmed too dark. And I'll just present my little pet peeve about that. I think that film producers and cinematographers nowadays have this bad inclination to try to make their films dark and spooky. This started back around the time of the original Batman series of films with Michael Keaton, produced by Tim Burton. And I think it's just a horrible thing to do. The cinematography in this film is actually great, and there's a lot of awesome details that could be missed because they just chose to make it so dark. I think film creators should just get over that and realize people really don't want the film completely dark. We want to see the beautiful cinematography that you produced. Let the film express what it expresses, and not try to take the exposure so far down that you got to bump it way up in a computer program. It's ridiculous to have to do that. So end rant there. So you will notice that every one of my images regarding these frames from these films is enhanced by bumping up the contrast and in some cases the saturation levels or the white black/white levels. That has to be altered to get the detail that I want without things looking way too dark. So going back to the analysis, Bugs is running away from the agents, and we see here on the rooftop as she runs away one of the somewhat comical insertions into the modal, quote unquote, by whoever programmed the modal. And we see there's a restaurant across the street on the other rooftop. Again, these happen in a few frames, so unless you slow it down or really, really pay attention, you may miss it. It says in Spanish, sabor a mierda, and that means the taste of shit. Okay? So whoever is programming this modal or game within a game is putting these references that are incendiary and or comical for a purpose, for a reason. And we find out what he's doing is he's basically telling the characters within the modal, you're eating shit. You're taking other people's shit, you're eating it, they're force-feeding you shit, and you're just accepting it. You're accepting a false version of reality, okay, that's being force-fed to you, okay? So obviously this is the Thomas Anderson character programming this modal this way for a particular purpose, which we're going to learn about. Now, Bugs is running away from the agents, and we see her slide down a sign on an adjacent building that she leaps to. And of course, this is known as the Anderson Hotel. The sign actually says Anderson's Hotel. And then very quickly you see as she's sliding down the sign and crashes into this and breaks off this sign at the bottom of this larger sign, it says, for those who love to eat shit. So there's this reference once again to the taste of shit, someone who loves to eat shit, someone who's just taking other people's shit that they're force feeding them down their throat and just eating it. Okay? This is about the order followers. This is about the people who just accept blindly the version of reality that is given to them by the social engineers, by the dark occultists of our world, by the complicit lying media that the dark occultists own and control. They are just accepting a false paradigm, a false version of reality, and they're just eating shit. So the Thomas Anderson character is subconsciously programming this in here for a reason. And that is to evolve a particular character, as we're going to find out, to evolve a particular person in this modal. So, many people may have missed that aspect, but I thought it was important to bring forward. So here you see the sign Anderson's Hotel on the right, the A and the N in the frame, with Bugs's leg coming down as she slides down the sign. But we also see on the right-hand side another sign above a cafe that says awake. Again, this is another aspect of the purpose of the modal, is to awaken a character, to awaken someone who is inside this modal game within a game. And we're going to find out it is, of course, Agent Smith. So, another reference to awakening here. Okay, not only is he telling the person that he wants to work on and awaken, that, you're eating shit, you're taking other people's shit, you love the taste of shit, and having a taste of shit restaurant that he could go to. Presumably, if you stay at the Anderson Hotel, and it's for those who love to eat shit, then you could go down the block and go right to, Sabor a Mierda and enjoy the taste of shit. So, comical references here, but he's also putting in here, you need to awaken. You have to awake to the nature of reality because you're being force-fed shit and you don't understand what's really going on. Okay? So, there's also across from there in another frame, which I don't have in the presentation, another cafe called Exile, with an arrow like pointing out, like get out of the matrix, exile yourself from this control system, exile your mind, get out from the control system. Okay? So interesting philosophical allegories inserted very early on in the film. So as Bugs runs away from the agents, including Agent Smith, she jumps off the roof of the building, crashes through the for those who love to eat shit sign on the side of the Anderson's Hotel, and then she proceeds to continue to run away from the agents and hide in a keymaker shop. So clearly the keymaker was a character in the original trilogy, representing that the key to really unlocking a lot of the things that are important to understand about the Matrix and unlocking some of the back doors of the Matrix, of the control system, and understanding how to get out is contained in knowledge, specifically self-knowledge, okay, and the laws of causality. To unlock, that's how he, in Matrix 2, he even got to the Merovingian, with the keymaker's help. And that's the whole point, that the key is understanding causality. And Bugs is hiding in this keymaker shop, and there's no one in it. And agents are rushing forward to, attack and apprehend Bugs. And just before they get to her, she is pulled out of the keymaker shop by Agent Smith. Okay, he runs to pull her out, and she is taken into the back door area, the back door code of the Matrix. So Smith pulls her into a back door room, okay, and that is represents a back door represents in programming a piece of code that a developer programs into a computer program whereby they have access but other people don't. They might want access into an app. They might want access into a networking protocol, and it's done covertly. It's a covert backdoor to a computer program or network protocol. That's what a backdoor represents. And he pulls her through this backdoor area of the Matrix and then into another room, which looks like some type of an apartment room. And we will subsequently find out that it is Thomas Anderson's apartment. So let's read some of the dialogue. I'll read some of the dialogue that takes place between these two characters in this scene. Bugs asks Smith, "Why did you save me?" And Smith answers her, "You first. Who are you and where did you come from?" And Bugs answers, "My name is Bugs, as in bunny, and tech that listens. Do you know that this is a modal? Smith says, "What's a modal?" And she says, "It's a simulation used to evolve programs. Do you understand that you are digital sentience?" And Smith replies, "I know what I am. Just like I know my job is to hunt down and destroy sentience like you." Sentience in this movie is a term representing people who are somewhat between human and code. Humans that may hack into the Matrix and represent themselves as an element of code as a human being within the Matrix, or even machines operating within the world that can pass code into and out of the Matrix, or programs like himself that are evolved digital sentience, a computer program that's becoming aware of its own sentience. They call that throughout the film sentience. So he says, "I know what I am, just like I know that my job here is to hunt down and destroy sentience like you, and yet here we are." Bugs then goes on to say, "The other agents don't know about this room," or asks him in a questioning way. "The other agents don't know about this room?" And he doesn't answer verbally. He shakes his head no. And she then says, "How did you find it?" And Smith says, "No one was ever in the key shop, so I started looking," presumably meaning looking for back doors to other places within the Matrix, connecting from the key shop to other areas, okay, in the back door areas of the Matrix. And Bugs says, "And the more you looked, the more you found. It's the story of my life." And that's a reference to knowledge. You know, she's the rabbit, Bugs, right? Okay? Going down the rabbit hole of knowledge, of self-knowledge and knowledge about our world. And she says, "That's the story of my life. The more you looked, the more you found." That's how the unfolding of knowledge works. The unfolding of knowledge works. The more you seek knowledge, the more the universe is going to bring knowledge to your attention and awareness and show you things that you didn't previously understand. That's what having an open mind and pursuing true knowledge is all about, and how it unfolds. So she then says, "I feel like I know this room. This is his apartment." And of course, she is referring to Thomas Anderson. This is subsequently quickly confirmed because she finds his computer and his badge, his ID badge, from the Matrix 1 movie/game that is his former company, Metacortex, where he formerly worked and coded. So it's confirmed that they are, in fact, now standing in Thomas Anderson's former apartment from the Matrix 1. So she says this is his apartment, and Smith answers, "You mean Thomas Anderson's? I searched everywhere. He doesn't exist." Bugs then replies, "He stopped being Thomas a long time ago, but maybe you know him by his real name, Neo. Most people think that Neo is dead, but I know he's not, because I've seen him. And the moment he looked at me, I felt something unlock my mind." So let me just move on to the next slide here. So as the conversation continues between them, she's telling him, "First time I ever saw Neo, I felt something unlock my mind," because that's who Neo represents. Neo represents one that could change things, events, and even people within the Matrix, okay, and help to awaken them. Again, Christ consciousness that could be infectious and help other people see through the illusion. And Smith replies to that, "Something like that happened to me. I saw this pattern, and it was everywhere. We can't see it, but we're all trapped inside these strange repeating loops. Somehow I saw it in the mirror, and suddenly I understood." Now, what this is a reference to is to really see the control system of the world, you have to do personal introspection and shadow work upon yourself. You have to develop self-respect, which means to see again, to look at things from a different perspective. And the first thing you have to look at from a different perspective is yourself, your own mind. So the Agent Smith character here is saying when he finally looked in the mirror truly, then he understood. And Bugs replies, this is not the real world. That's what he understood. That's what they came to understood upon really confronting themselves. And Smith was able to see that see the patterns of the world and what's really taking place, seeing through the illusion by looking in the mirror and seeing the matrix code pattern. You actually see him here pushing his fingers through the mirror and it waving and becoming less solid, okay? Waking up to the illusion, okay, of who the matrix is telling him he is as an agent of control, okay? And then Smith says, for the first time, I felt real purpose. I knew who I was and what I had to do. Here we come to really the heart of the philosophy of the film already within the first few scenes, okay? Matrix 4, Resurrections, is about purpose. It's about remembering who you are, and it's about remembering what your true purpose is, what you are here to do. And the resurrections aspect of it is what needs to be resurrected within yourself. What aspects of consciousness are dead or presumed dead at the beginning of this film? Certainly they're under the control of the Matrix because they're not awake, functioning in the real world and fulfilling their purpose. Trinity and Neo, emotion and action, representing the people may even have knowledge about what's going on, but they don't care enough to take right action by spreading the information and helping to awaken others, which is what the whole purpose of this whole film is to express. Who are you? Do you remember who you are? Do you remember the mission that you came here to fulfill? Do you remember your true purpose? It's about memory and purpose. Okay? Remembering who you are and remembering what you came here to do. And that's what Agent Smith, who we're going to subsequently find out awakens to become Morpheus, okay, is saying. For the first time when he saw through the Matrix code, he felt real purpose. He knew who he was and what he had to do. And Bugs says, who are you? What do you have to do? And Smith replies, I am Morpheus, and I have to find Neo, his purpose within the Matrix. He is obviously a program within this modal, okay? And Thomas Anderson has apparently subconsciously programmed this modal so that Bugs could find Morpheus, and then Morpheus could awaken to who he is, right? From Agent Smith to Morpheus. And then Morpheus can go and start the process of finding Neo in the Matrix, helping to locate him so that the humans can find his actual real world location and get him out of his pod. Brilliant, a little complicated of a, simulation inside of another simulation, but beautifully done as a spiritual allegory, because our mind has to essentially find the route to unlock our right action. And it, of course, does this through true care, connection. We'll see that whole idea of connection being another central focus, another central motif of the movie as we move on. Bugs replies to this revelation that who she thought was Agent Smith is in fact a new version of Morpheus within the Matrix. She says, Morpheus, oh my God, I have to get you out of here. I need to figure out who built this modal. And obviously, Bugs now wants to awaken the Morpheus program within this modal so she can get him out of the modal and out of the Matrix and get his code as a program into the real world on board the hover ship that she is on. So she presents Morpheus now with the choice between the red pill and the blue pill. And the red pill clearly represents the truth of the control system that you have been embedded within. And the blue pill represents staying in fantasy and illusion and not accepting the truth of your current situation that you are in. Just like we all have a choice between the acceptance of the truth or the rejection of the truth about our world as a system of slavery. So Bugs presents Morpheus with the choice between these two pills. And she says to him, "Come with me. But you have to be ready to leave. You have to be really ready." And when she says you have to be really ready, she shows him the red pill. And then she says, "But if you're not, if you think that this is where you belong," and then she shows him the blue pill. So she's giving him this choice. And then Morpheus goes on to respond, "You call this a choice?" And now this motif is repeated over and over again within the film. This idea of a false choice, the idea of the Hegelian dialectic, of presenting a false choice, just giving people the illusion that they really, truly have a choice. And he's basically saying this isn't a choice at all. Why would I want to stay in this modal as someone who I'm not and engage in fantasy? Of course, he knows that he has to take the red pill of truth and go down the rabbit hole to get out of the matrix. And Bugs then replies, and this is very important now, okay? Very, very important to understand. I'll just keep it here for a moment, this slide. That Bugs is now going to talk about her experience being given this choice to take these two, between these two pills. And this is a key moment in the dialogue between them, because everybody's who's giving bad analyses of these films is trying to insist that this is about some binary notion of gender and talking about, gender politics and, transgenderism, etc. Okay. And it absolutely is not, okay? And the character herself in the movie, written by Lana Wachowski, is going to confirm that this isn't the point. So when Morpheus says, "You call this a choice," implying that it's a completely false illusion of choice, Bugs replies to him, "Honestly, when somebody offered me these things, I went off on them about binary conceptions of the world and said that there was no way I was swallowing some symbolic reduction of my life." Now, listen to that again. When they offered her, when whoever was offering to wake her up out of the matrix of illusion and offering her the choice between red and blue pills, she says she went off on this person about binary conceptions of the world and saying she's not going to swallow a symbolic reduction of her life, meaning a choice between binary. She considered, there's non-binary, right? There's other options. And she then proceeds to say, "And the woman with the pills laughed at me because I was completely missing the point." So she says that's not what this is about. And indirectly, the director and writer is saying that's not what this is about. This is about the choice between truth and illusion. This is about the truth between acceptance of the world the way that it really is and seeing it as it really is, and then making a decision to do something about it, to change it, versus engaging in accepting the shit that they make you eat, the illusion that they constantly push upon you. So she says, "I myself was completely missing the point." And Morpheus responds to her, "What point?" And she says that the choice is an illusion. You already know what you have to do. So she's referencing this notion of a dialectic at work. There is no choice between truth and illusion. For anybody who cares even the slightest bit and has the slightest bit of self-respect, you have to take the red pill. You already know what you have to do. Morpheus then replies to her, "Truth," and immediately takes the red pill from her hand and swallows it. Okay? And that means I agree. This is the truth. What you're saying is true. Okay? And it's a reference to the red pill being representative of truth. Okay? Not representative of choice between genders. It's a choice between truth and illusion, fantasy, and falsehood. Okay? So that essentially, it doesn't conclude the scene, because then what happens is, and we're going to see this motif repeated over and over again throughout the film, really throughout the whole franchise. After Morpheus takes the red pill and they're trying to track his program code to presumably bring it out of the Matrix and on board their ship, agents attack them. So we're going to see this motif over and over and over again throughout the film. As soon as main characters, as soon as protagonists, the heroes, start making progress, agents show up conducting violence. And this is representative of the system isn't going to allow positive progress through awakening and creating new things. It's going to come with violence every time that happens. We hear over and over again, I hear over and over again in the freedom movement, especially in New Age circles, it isn't about destroying the existing system. It's about creating something new. And I have to say, this is New Age bullshit. It is about destroying the old system, because these people are going to continue to come with their violence. They're not going to allow new things to emerge. That is why there is nothing new under the sun. That is why nothing is new. Slavery is ancient and has always been here. Humanity has always been in a state of slavery. We were created as slave beings, and we continue to be in that condition. That's why there is nothing new has emerged in consciousness. New things will be able to emerge when we end the human condition of slavery by ending government. The condition of government is the condition of slavery. And until that is ended, do not expect anything new. These agents of the control system of slavery will continue to come with their violence whenever any progress is made. And the director of the film and the writer of the film are clearly indicating this. They are implying this. And they show every time progress is made by the protagonists of the film, agents of the control system arrive, not trying to talk them out of it or persuade them to anything. They just arrive and conduct violence, just like the good little shit-eating order followers that they are. That's all the police and military and agents, alphabet soup agents of our world are. Shit-eating order followers that do nothing but come to conduct violence when their masters tell them to go and conduct violence, like the dogs that they call them and that they are. Okay? As we've talked about ad infinitum on this series of broadcasts. And, we'll see that repeated over and over again, and I have a little bit more to say about it later. So, Bugs and the new Morpheus character, who is now a program, because as we're going to find out, obviously the old Morpheus has died in the real world. This is many, many years, many decades later. We'll subsequently find out in linear time. And they have to escape from these Matrix. Sequoia helps them get a window out of the Matrix as they leap off of a building. He finally does extract them from the Matrix and extract Morpheus's code, presumably to the hovercraft that they are using to hack into the Matrix, or at least to hack into this modal game within the Matrix. Okay? So, the next scene then is shown, and we have Keanu Reeves, the actor and, star of the film, portrayed as Thomas Anderson. He is clearly in the Matrix. He's not in the real world. He's back reinserted into the Matrix, as the machines clearly did with him, with his body. And he is shown to be, in this false reality, a game developer, a game designer. And his job is to be working on this game called Binary. And we learned that Binary is a game that he is coding for his parent company. And it's after he coded the series of games called The Matrix, which, apparently he wanted to code and his heart was in it. And now they were successful. And now the company that he works for is just having them program something that is representative of the binary false choice of the Hegelian dialectic, of left versus right, of Democrat versus Republican, of religion versus atheism, of conservative versus liberal, and a million other binary choices that we're given endlessly to fight over non-productively and not make any progress in human consciousness. So clearly, this is what this game represents, the Hegelian dialectic. Not the gender binary choice that, people want to say that this is all about. It is absolutely not that. And their analysis is not very good because it does not come from a true occult philosophical perspective that clearly the movie is truly coming from. The reason I can see these dynamics within a film like this is because of my past and current study of the occult philosophy and the whole world of occultism. And when you have that knowledge under your belt, you can clearly see the messages immediately. You could decode them in real time. So as I'm watching this film, I'm realizing, oh, wow, look at what they're saying. Other people can see this and they're only coming at it from their limited perspective of, things that they think it's about. And another thing, as I've said over and over, people hear and see what they want to see. They don't really deeply listen and watch. And again, I am explaining to people, you have to listen to the dialogue of a movie as much as you have to watch it. Forget the action sequences and all of that. I mean, that part of that can convey things too, but that's not where the important things that go on. The really important things go on is you have to deeply, deeply listen at a very, very, very meticulous level to the dialogue being spoken. And that's why I'm saying it slowly and articulating it. A lot of these actors mumble. A lot of them say their lines way too fast because they think that's cool. It's not. Okay? Read the dialogue. Let people hear it. We want to hear what's being said. We don't want to have to go and listen 6 times to hear something. Raise the volume up, and then special effects sounds come in and blow your eardrums out. Right? Filmmakers, listen. Understand this. You will be hailed as a hero if you get away from this dumbass pattern. Tell your actors not to mumble. Let them speak the dialogue clearly. If it was important enough for you to write, it's important enough for people to hear. Okay? The first time they hear it. Not to go back and listen 6 times or have to download subtitles from the internet. Okay? And the other thing is, let people see it too. Stop making your films overly dark. It's nonsense and it's not cool. You think it's cool and it isn't. You're wrong. It's not cool. It's played. Do you get it? Are you hearing me? All right. End of that next rant. All right. So Anderson is in his company office building. He's presented as a game designer and he's clearly miserable. Okay. He clearly doesn't like what he's doing. And he has coded this modal game within a game. So the Matrix modal mini game inside of binary, okay? And he's working at a company called Deus Machina. Now, that doesn't mean God from the machine. Again, in my first part of the breakdown, I said Deus ex machina, God from the machine, is what the transhumanists of our world and the technocrats of our world want. They want to be God emerging from technology and their status in the world as technocrats, okay? But there is a positive incarnation of God from the machine. It could represent, if we look at it from a positive perspective, which obviously the negative perspective is technocrats, occultists, dark occultists, social engineers are saying we want to emerge as gods from technology and from our manipulation and use of technology and wielding it as a weapon on the population that we see as our slaves. Clearly, that's a bad version of Deus ex machina, okay? In Latin, meaning God from the machine. The positive aspect that we could look at Deus ex machina from is that higher consciousness, God-like consciousness, not necessarily godhood, but God-like consciousness, could emerge from a proper usage of technology. Technology is simply a tool. A tool can be used for good or evil. Okay? If we use it to reach other people's minds and unlock them from the worldview, that the false worldview they're living in, which is contributing to human slavery, then we could create a godlike mind in the body of humanity from our positive usage of technology, the machine. Just an alternative way of looking at it. In this instance, in the Matrix that the Thomas Anderson character is clearly in, we are, of course, seeing a negative aspect of Deus Machina, and the X is dropped from that. It's not Deus Ex Machina, it's Deus Machina, which means God is the machine, or the machine is God, okay? The machine as God, God as the machine. However you want to interpret that, it's equating them. The X is removed, okay? And it's saying not God from the machine, but God as the machine, or is the machine, okay? And, that's how these technocrats simply see themselves. They're God. They have created this false reality and this control system of slavery, and they're going to rule it as the God of it. So interesting that they named his company Deus Machina. So in this scene, his office manager named Jude walks in, and he sees him tinkering with this modal and clearly doesn't like it because he's not being paid to do that. He's being paid to work on the game called Binary and make improvements to it. Instead, he's using old Matrix code to make a sub-game within Binary to evolve that Agent Smith character so that he can learn that he's Morpheus. And clearly he did this all subconsciously while he's inserted in the Matrix. So his office manager, Jude, asks him to go with him to a coffee shop, on Anderson's, saying, I need some coffee. So they go to a coffee shop, and we see on the outside the sign on the building says Simulate. I thought this was another pretty clever take on simulation and coffee, latte, which is an espresso drink. Okay, so simulate, it could be the way that you say it, but they obviously pronounce it Simulate. So I thought that was pretty clever and wanted to put it in there in the presentation here. So inside of the coffee shop Simulate, Jude, Thomas Anderson's office manager at Deus Machina, sits down with him for a cup of coffee, and here's how some of the dialogue goes between them. Jude says to Thomas Anderson, the first time I played the trilogy, meaning the Matrix games that Thomas Anderson coded for Deus Machina, I was shook. The paradox between free will and destiny. Are we all just algorithms doing what we're supposed to do? Or can we escape our programming? So right here, Jude, Anderson's office manager at Deus Machina, is saying what the whole Matrix trilogy was really about. Are we all, as human beings, just algorithms that are coded by the social engineers, right? Are we all just fulfilling programming that was given to us by someone else? Or can we escape that programming? Can we mentally get out of the mind control programming that we've been given since birth? Right out in the open, saying this. If people are listening, right? If they're paying attention and listening and not hearing what they want to hear, if they're listening to the dialogue that's actually being spoken. So, Jude continues to say, you tell me, Mr. Anderson, is it free will or destiny? So he's saying, which is it? To Thomas Anderson, do you believe that we all have free will and we can work upon ourselves and escape our pre-given programming? Or is it all just predetermined? Is it all just fate? And before the Thomas Anderson character even gets to answer this question, a woman who we subsequently learn is named Tiffany walks into the coffee shop Simulate. And this is the character of Trinity, played by Carrie-Anne Moss. So we find that she is also in the Matrix still. Obviously, her body was repaired by the machine somehow, reinserted into the Matrix code. She's in a pod just like Neo's in a pod, and they're both in the Matrix. And she now, in her Matrix false life identity, is portrayed as a woman with a husband and children. And Jude sees that Thomas Anderson really has an attraction to her and likes her, and he insists upon introducing them and going over and trying to get Thomas Anderson to talk to Tiffany. Okay, so this is the scene where he's introducing her, and her children are there with her, and her husband walks in to tell them that they have to get going because presumably they have to get the kids to school and he has to go to work, etc. So that's sort of where that scene ends, with a brief meeting between them. But one of the big takeaways of the scene is actually just before this happens, where the husband walks in, when Thomas Anderson and Tiffany first touch and first shake hands during their initial greeting. There is an awakening of a connection between them. And this is a huge motif over and over again in the film that a lot of people in their analyses would say, oh, they did this whole touch and shaking of hands, holding of hands things too much. And I think the point is being missed, because this isn't just about them liking each other and having an attraction to each other within the Matrix code. This is about the motif of bonding and having genuine connection in the real world between people, specifically the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, the alchemical wedding, okay? The joining and bonding and working together of the heart and our actions, okay? And really, of course, that being made possible through the Morpheus character, the mind, okay? So uniting the whole trinity of heart, mind, and guts, okay? Emotion, thought, and action. And this is also a reference to physical connection between people and togetherness, closeness, because that's what we're being prevented from doing in the COVID era, in the, the era of the whole plandemic, the scamdemic, okay? They want people separated. They want them apart from each other. And as we're going to hear in the second part of this allegorical breakdown next week, the character, the analyst, who we will discover, who I think was arguably the most important character in the film, representing the social engineers, the dark occultists, parallel to the architect of the first Matrix in this new incarnation of the Matrix, wants to keep them separated from each other so they can't really realize their true power when they come together. Okay? Brilliant allegory. There's true power when your real care comes together to support right action. Okay? That's what the sacred feminine and sacred masculine is all about, and that's what these characters are about. So this connection scene with them shaking hands, holding hands, is very critical to understand. It is part of the allegorical breakdown and part of a motif that we're going to see repeated over and over again throughout the fourth film. So, in the next subsequent scene, we see Thomas Anderson back in his office building at Deus Machina, and we find out that his modal, his game within a game, was deleted by his coworker at the request of his boss. And we see his boss standing at the window of the building, of the office building, and he has a bust next to him on the right-hand side there that looks exactly like Agent Smith. So since the original Agent Smith character became awoken to his true purpose as Neo, or at least within the modal, he woke to his purpose as, as Morpheus. In the regular Matrix, we're seeing that this is going to be the Agent Smith character in the Matrix, the second incarnation of this Matrix program. He is going to be Agent Smith. And we see the bust showing, Agent Smith when Neo punched him. Presumably, I think that was in the third film, I think. So this is a precursor. It's foreshadowing that this is really the Smith character now, the Smith program. So the boss calls, after ordering that deletion by the other coworker of the modal, and Anderson finding out that it was deleted, the boss calls Thomas Anderson into a meeting with him in his office. And when he's standing at the window looking at the city skyline, he says, he is echoing Agent Smith's words from the original trilogy. He says, billions of people just living out their lives oblivious. So this is a reference that the people are asleep. They're under mind control. They're oblivious to the system of slavery that they are embedded in. They're oblivious to the false version of reality that they are given. And he says, I always loved that line. And then he looks out the window at the city landscape and he says, every time I stand here, oh my God, it's so perfect. It's gotta be fake, right? A reference that the control system has things pretty much so completely under control that like it can't even be real. We have to be living in some sort of an artificial simulation, and this is computerized code somehow. Now, I don't believe that, but it's an interesting thing to consider. Are we living in some kind of a computer-generated reality? You know, I don't think so. I think it's just that people's minds are so perfectly programmed that it can seem like that because they're not making their decisions of their own free will. They are products of social engineering, and they are programmed by the dark occult social engineers of our world. So then the dialogue between them progresses into what he called them into the office for. The boss of Deus Machina says, our beloved parent company, Warner Brothers, has decided to make a sequel to the trilogy. And they made it clear that they'll kill our contract if we don't cooperate. And this is something that the Thomas Anderson character within the Matrix said he would never do. He wanted to make those 3 films and that would be the end of it. However, this may be a reference that the makers of the trilogy of movies, the Wachowski siblings, did not want to do a 4th Matrix, but the parent company of the movies in real life, the Warner Brothers company, decided to make a sequel with or without them at the helm. And this may be why only Lana Wachowski did it and Lily did not. Although Lily's been vocal in interviews about what, she perceives to be the purpose of these films, which I believe is way off. And I think it's a clear indicator that Lana is the real driving, factor philosophically behind these films, or at least she understands that. A lot of people have also speculated that they may have taken the body of information, the philosophical and occult information that underlie these films from someone else, or being handed that information on a platter to use to make these movies. That's interesting to speculate about. I don't really know what the truth about that is, so I'm not going to continue to speculate on it. However, it's something that people have brought to the table for others to consider. That being said, maybe they didn't want to do these films and were pressured into it and did them, at least Lana did it begrudgingly, not to lose royalties. And that's what the boss is saying, that they're going to have to make this 4th game to an addendum to the trilogy when the Thomas Anderson creator of the original trilogy of games did not want to. And he then says to Thomas Anderson, I know you said that the story was over for you, meaning the first 3 games, the storyline of the original Matrix trilogy of games within the Matrix here. He says, I know you said the story was over for you, but that's the thing about stories. They never really end, do they? And this is a reference to our stories in the real world don't really end. They only take on new allegorical appearances, and we're saying the same things, and it's really about the same things and the same characters, the same aspects of consciousness and the same aspects of ourselves, but we just tell them in many different ways with different faces, etc. He says, we're still telling the same stories we've always told, just with different names and different faces. And I have to say that I'm kind of excited. After all these years, to be going back to where it all started, back to the Matrix. That's clearly a reference that the game was what made their franchise of games successful. that people loved the first one and followed it through, and they are making money. The company is making money because of that series of games that was made. And then they're making other games, again, like Binary, but now they're tasked by the parent company to make a fourth incarnation of one that the Anderson character said he did not want to be involved in. So when he's telling him this, there's so much anxiety on the part of the Thomas Anderson character that he begins to have a psychotic break with his version of reality within the Matrix. And he is seeing the mouth of his boss start to morph and close and disappear, just like his did when he was in the interrogation room with the original Agent Smith character in the Matrix, and his mouth disappeared. So this is, basically a recurrence of that motif of losing one's voice. So when he sees this happen, the next scene cuts away to him getting therapy in a psychiatrist's office. And we are then introduced to who I consider to be the most important character of this fourth film, the analyst, played by Neil Patrick Harris. And I want to say a couple things about this character. First of all, this character is certainly who I consider to be the most important character in the fourth film, because he represents the social engineer. He represents the dark occultists of our world as the ancient psychologists that they are, the master psychologists that they are, that came out of the ancient world, that came out of the old variations of the Matrix, and are erecting a new version of the control system of slavery, as we've talked about endlessly here on What on Earth is Happening. The second thing I want to say about the Neil Patrick Harris character, obviously from Doogie Howser MD series back in the 80s, he stole the show. His acting and his character stole the movie completely out from under the main actors of Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss. Not to say they didn't do a good job, but Neil Patrick Harris stole the show outright. Okay? You have to understand his character to understand the allegory, and you have to understand who he represents. He represents the current social engineers and dark occultists of our world who are giving us constantly the false reality of our world, and therefore controlling people's minds in the human slavery system of our real world. So, and I've told people you have to see the dark occult as a form of ancient psychology. These are master psychologists with knowledge that has come down to them and their bloodlines through the ancient world. That is who the dark occultists who really run our world and keep people in thrall in a state of mind control really are. And that's who this character represents. He is the architect of this new incarnation of the Matrix, and his character is called the Analyst. So he's a psychiatrist/psychologist. He is sitting down having a session with the Thomas Anderson character. And he says to him in this conversation, "What were you feeling at that point?" And Thomas Anderson says, "I felt either I'm having a mental breakdown again, or I'm living inside a computer-generated reality that has imprisoned me again." Okay? So he is saying to him that I feel like I'm in one of these two dynamics. I'm either totally losing my mind, or I'm in a computer-generated simulation once again. Now, we understand as viewers of what's really going on from outside of it that he's correct about one of these things, right? He is imprisoned by a computer simulation yet again. He speaks the truth here. Okay. However, the goal and the role of the analyst is to feed him the false version of reality. That no, you're not in a computer-generated simulation. This is real life. This is the real world. This is how you should really see yourself and what's going on. And it's all fake. It's a lie. So he has an intuitive perspective that he's correct and he's imprisoned. He's in a state of slavery once again. And the analyst's job in this Matrix version is to convince him, no, that isn't true, that this is the real world, and, keep him there mentally. So here's how the conversation proceeds. The analyst says to him, after he says, I either think I'm losing my mind or I'm in another simulated prison, he says, that's not much of a choice. Again, he's dissuading him from it, saying, well, that's like a dialectic, right? That neither one is really true, but he's lying to him in this case. He says, maybe it's not as binary as that. Maybe there are other ways to understand what happened by him seeing the mouth of his boss go away. He says to him, yesterday you walked into a meeting with your business partner and he ambushed you, demanding that you make a game that you said you would never make. This attack effectively took away your voice. His violence triggered you, and your mind fought back. You did to him what he was doing to you, meaning trying to take away his voice. Saying he saw his mouth close up, and that was because his voice, Thomas Anderson's voice, was taken away, and he was kind of subconsciously doing to him what the boss was doing to him by saying, you have no choice, you have no voice, no say in this, you have to make the game. So he's giving him this psychoanalysis that is actually false, because Anderson is correct in one of his assessments. And then the analyst says to him, he continues and says, I believe this episode demonstrates healthy self-protection. And more importantly, I remember how hard it was for you to share something like this, which tells me just how far we've come in their therapy sessions. He then asks him, do you need a refill on your prescription? And the Anderson character says yes, that he does need a refill. So the goal of the analyst, again, is to give him this false version of reality and anchor him in it and feed him a pharmacy prescription, okay? The pills that will keep him anchored in the false reality. And obviously, yes, that is the blue pill. So the next scene cuts away and we see that he is prescribed the blue pill by the analyst. His job is to keep him in the false version of reality. Just like the media, the social engineers of our world, the dark occultists, their job is to keep us firmly anchored in a false reality and feed us that shit and tell us, no, you're not a slave. This is real life. This is the real world. This is what you're supposed to be. This is your identity. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it too much and just keep taking the shit that we feed you. So, very interestingly, in this next scene, Thomas Anderson turns the pill bottle around, or I should say he holds it in proximity to the camera enough that we can see the name, but the bottle is being held upside down. So I turned the frame upside down and zoomed in on it, and you could see two allegorical things. One, it is from Folly Bridge Pharmacy, explaining that to ignore reality and not look for and accept the truth is folly. You're going down the path of folly. You're going off the bridge of folly. It's from Folly Bridge Pharmacy. And then, it has his name on it, but underneath his name, it says the word, which is the name of the so-called medication, the blue pill that keeps you in a state of artificial reality, ontolofloxacin. Now, if we break down what the two roots of this drug name are and what they mean, the first, ontolo, is from the term ontology. Ontology is a branch of philosophy that deals with learning about and understanding the nature of the reality that we are in as human beings and asking questions about reality and eventually getting to a place where you understand how reality functions and your place and your role within it. So this is the first part of ontolofloxacin, ontology. And then floxin comes from a Latin root meaning flow. Okay? So think about what the drug name means. It means that when you take this, reality becomes fluid and it can flow into whatever the people who are trying to push off the false reality want to make you perceive it as. Flowing reality? Reality isn't flowing. reality is objective. We can come to understand, if we have the tool set and understand the questions that need to be asked and the investigative steps that need to be taken to understand reality. That is called epistemology, as we'll see later. We'll break down allegorical elements of epistemology in this film a little later. But that is objective. We can objectively come to know that if we work hard enough at doing those things. And this is saying, no, you can't really know that. It's flowing, it's free flowing, and we can make of it whatever we want. That's a reference to solipsism and getting people to swallow solipsism as a drug, as a religion. So the social engineers want to make reality a free-flowing thing that they can push into your mind and get you to accept whatever version of reality that they force feed us. Okay, powerful allegorical concept here embedded in the film with the name of the blue pill we learn is ontolofloxacin. Okay, moving on, we see that upon taking the ontolofloxacin blue pill, the Thomas Anderson character in The Matrix is unable to do anything to perceive those patterns that the Morpheus character talked about earlier. He can't look into the mirror and see the patterns, see what's really there. He's not really able to do any deep introspection because those pills, representative of the false reality the media and social engineers are constantly pushing on us, and that pills like antidepressants also keep us anchored in that state of consciousness whereby we're not really doing any introspection and feeling our emotions. He can't see the patterns of the Matrix anymore. He's firmly locked in their reality. Powerful allegory. Then the next scene cuts away to showing that some of the Deus Machina employees are having discussions about what the next Matrix film, Matrix game within the Matrix, what this next game that they're going to build with Thomas Anderson's help should be about. So these are like story writers, ancillary employees that are contributing to the game in different ways. And they have differing views on what it should be about. So one of them says, what made the Matrix different? It effed with your head. That's what the employee on the right says. It fucked with your head. The second employee on the left says, people want us to be up in their gray space, up in their brain, switching their synaptic, what the hell is going on here, light on. So they're both agreeing that it should be philosophical, it should be allegorical, it should have deep things, deep questions to ponder. It should mess with your head to the extent that you consider what's really going on here in our life on Earth. And they wanted to have that allegorical content, as the first trilogy clearly did. But then we see the opposite of that. We see the total imbecile who doesn't know himself, doesn't care, only wants it to be about action sequences and special effects and, shoot 'em up, right? And this is how many game players are. They're totally shut down to the allegorical aspect of what a game or a film is trying to truly represent. And all they want to do is have it be escapism and, use it to fulfill their action addiction. So this employee, who the Thomas Anderson character is reacting to like, oh my God, what a fucking imbecile, almost doing a complete facepalm, putting his head in his hand, while he's, explaining what he thinks the game should be about, when Anderson's sitting next to him as the actual, major, contributor, major writer and creator of the game, primary creator of the game. This employee says, I didn't love the first one, like some of you. And frankly, I've got zero tolerance for anything that requires a syllabus and a highlighter. I like my games big, loud, and dumb. Matrix means mayhem. Okay? Clearly not what the series is about, not what the allegory is about. And this is why many people who don't perceive the films as spiritual allegories have these ridiculous, nonsensical assessments of them and only care about the action sequences and the special effects. And that's why they'll say, oh, Matrix 4 wasn't as good as any of the originals because it didn't have as many effects. I thought it had tons of special effects, that they were very well done. And, you know, as a movie, I may not totally compare it, in every aspect to the original trilogy, especially the first one, of course. But it's no slouch whatsoever when it comes to explaining allegorical philosophy and occult philosophy, quite frankly. I think it did a brilliant job at doing that. And I think it stands out with any of the other films in the job that it did in that regard. So I really enjoyed it and can say I clearly understood what was being conveyed in it. So some of the other employees then chime in about what they think the original trilogy was already about. And some other of these Deus Machina employees say, obviously the Matrix was about trans politics, and that could mean transnational politics of our world, possibly even transgender politics could be referenced there, but they use the term trans politics, okay? And then another one says, no, obviously it's about crypto-fascism, hidden fascism that is done in a cryptic way, or fascism that is conducted in a covert way. Clearly, that could be what the Matrix is referencing as well. I feel that it absolutely is. And then another one says, no, it's a metaphor for capitalist exploitation. And a lot of people attacked Lana Wachowski for throwing that in there. But, I might agree that it's not just real, true capitalist exploitation, because in true capitalism, there wouldn't really be exploitation like that. But we have crony capitalism in our world. We don't have anything resembling true free market capitalism in any way whatsoever. Not that I consider myself a quote unquote capitalist. I think money is a form of a control system, period. I've said that many times on the show. It's highly unpopular. People want to try to paint me as some kind of leftist or communist for saying that. And I've said I hate communism as much as I hate fascism. They're two sides of the same dialectic. They're both slavery systems, and they both need to be destroyed. So yes, it is crypto-fascism, and it is a metaphor for cronyist capitalist exploitation, the fake form of capitalism, cronyism. So we do have crony capitalism, and the Matrix clearly could be a reference to that in certain aspects. All of these things that they throw out could be aspects of what the Matrix trilogy are about in a smaller level as an allegory of physical world events as they play out. Obviously, it's much more than that as a spiritual allegory. So throughout this sequence, we see that the Thomas Anderson character is also questioning things and beginning to wake up to his true self. The ontolofloxin is losing its power over him, and he is not engaging in the type of fantasy and delusion and illusion that some of the other workers in his building are. We see them on a large elevator going up to the higher part of the office building when they are looking into their phones and tablets, and they're not even paying attention to reality while he is not doing that, and he's looking at them like, wow, you're constantly like hooked in the reality that they're feeding you as consumers, and he seems to be coming out of that. So that's an interesting scene to show that the blue pill is losing power over his mind. We then see another scene where he's sitting in a bathroom stall in the office building, and on the adjacent sides of the stall to him, one piece of writing says look right, and the other piece of writing says look left. And he doesn't do either of these things. Okay, he's looking straight ahead. This is indicative of he is coming out of the false dialectical thinking, the illusion of false choice, without going left or right politically. And it doesn't mean staying politically centrist. It means you're not engaging in the false illusion, the false choice between left or right politics. He's instead looking straight ahead, completely ignoring the false paradigm of the Hegelian dialectic of left versus right, and instead looking at what is written on the door of the bathroom stall directly in front of him. And it says a very powerful quote a very powerful message, one of the most powerful messages of the movie. It says, it is so much simpler to bury reality than it is to dispose of dreams. And this is supposed to directly engage the viewer with a piece of occult philosophy. It's simpler to ignore and bury reality and push it away and not engage in reality and what's really going on within us and around us in the real world than it is to dispose of dreams. Okay? It's so much simpler to just say, I'm not going to engage in reality than it is to have to confront illusion and say, I need to do away with that. The word dreams here is not meant in the sense of positive dreams that we have about improving ourselves and the world and fulfilling our purpose, our true purpose. It means illusion and fantasy that doesn't help us remember who we are and remember what we are here to do. Engagement in illusion is what has to be disposed of. This is the second mandate or dictum of true initiation. True occult initiation, as we've talked about previously on What on Earth is Happening, is a five-fold process. Just like we have a five-fold aspect of ourselves: earth, air, water, fire, and spirit. Okay, the 5 points of the pentagram representing the self, representing the human being. We have a 5-step program to beginning the self-discovery process and beginning the process of learning about the actual nature of reality that we are embedded in here on earth, which is slavery. And that process is stop lying. So stop not telling the truth, especially to yourself. Stop lying to yourself about what's going on within and around you. The second is stop dreaming. Once again, not positive forms of dreams, as in aspirations and goals, but stop engaging in illusion and fantasy. Accept reality as it truly is. The third is learn how to think, which is learn the trivium method, the ancient trivium method of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, or in the ancient world, they referred to it as knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. That is what helps you to learn how to go through the truth discovery process of recognizing reality as it really is. So that is epistemology. How do we know what we know? How do we come to truth? How do we use a tool set of truth discovery to come to a place where we can say, I know this, and here is how I came to know this, objectively. The fourth step of initiation is live in the present moment. Don't engage in anxiety over the past, which cannot be changed, which is already done and has become the reality in the present moment that we are already living in. And don't have anxiety over the future, which is not here yet. Work within the present moment to improve the future, which will become our new present moment when we get there. So this quote on the door is about awakening, and it is about the initiatory process involved in awakening. And a very, very true philosophical statement. Upon completing that scene where he is waking up and at least resisting the false illusion of the matrix reality that he's being force-fed, the Thomas Anderson character takes his handful of prescribed ontolofloxacin blue pills and dumps them into his sink. So we're seeing he is making the move to get off of being hooked on the false reality that the analyst has given him and awaken to his true self and his true purpose. He's not there yet. He's not in that full state of power yet, clearly, but he's at least making the move toward that, and that's what this is allegorically showing us, that he is saying, I'm not going to swallow your shit anymore. I'm not going to take your false version of reality and accept it as real anymore. I'm better than that. I have more self-respect than that. Okay? So, once again, brilliantly presented symbolically there by the dumping of the blue pills into the sink, going down the drain where they belong. The next scene, he also makes the decision to start forging more genuine relationships. And again, this is this concept of connection, togetherness, genuine relationship, and touch. and he decides to start meeting with Tiffany. Okay, he doesn't like the people that he works with, really. Most of them seem vapid and or just directly trying to control him just to make money. And she's a person he seems genuinely interested in and wants to make a genuine connection with as a human being. And as I've said on previous episodes of What on Earth is Happening, the only genuine connection that we really can make with other human beings is when we both make a connection to the truth. We both make a connection to our higher selves, which is we both want to discover the truth and then act rightly in the world once we have discovered what is taking place within and around us in consciousness and understanding what's going on in our world and making that conscious decision to improve it. That is where genuine relationships begin. Everything else is an illusory form of a relationship. So again, here they're clinking their coffee cups together. This is the idea of they're making a genuine connection. And the Anderson character wants that genuine connection because he no longer wants that illusory version of reality to be fed to his mind and be hooked on it. So he's setting aside his inhibitions and meeting with Tiffany, and she's obviously setting aside hers because she's married, and that's clearly frowned upon. But we learn in this scene, as we'll see with the dialogue, that she doesn't really like her husband. Okay, she is asking deep philosophical questions about what our real motivations are as human beings, and are they given to us? Are they programmed into us from an early age? So here's how the conversation goes down between these two characters in the Simulate coffee shop. Tiffany says to Anderson, "I remember wanting a family, but was that because that's what women are supposed to want?" So she's challenging her own desires and saying, did I want a family only because society programmed me to want a family, or someone programmed me to want a family? How do you know if you want something yourself, or if your upbringing programmed you to want it? So here, social engineering is clearly being referenced. She's asking herself, did I really want that marriage and subsequently having these children? Or did society tell me over and over again, that's what women are supposed to want? And so I accepted that social engineering. Now, I'm not saying getting married and having a child are necessarily bad things. I personally don't believe in religion or the state, marriage licenses and things like that. But having a connection, a genuine connection between another human being and bearing offspring, I don't have a problem with that. Okay? She's simply asking the question, do many people just do that because they're told that that's what they should do? Okay? And that's something many people should think very deeply about if their decisions were driven by other people, or if they genuinely really wanted those things. So she's asking it right out in the open. And many of the philosophical questions are just posed right out in the open by many characters in this fourth movie. And I liked that about it. It starts to deveil the allegory much more. And she then proceeds to say, can I ask something about your game, meaning the Matrix games? She says, there's a woman in your game. I was looking at images from the game, at the character Trinity. She said, I showed my husband Chad a scene, and I said, don't you think she looks like me? And Chad laughed. And then I laughed too, like it was a joke. Because how could it not be, right? She's saying, how could it not be a joke? How could I have been a character that you programmed into your game from, this alleged artificial computer simulation? So she says, I laughed when he laughed because it was, how could it not be a joke? And then she said, but it made me really angry. It made me so angry. I hated myself for laughing. I wanted to kick him so hard, not too hard, maybe just hard enough to break his jaw off. So she's clearly demonstrating a lot of anger. Okay, this is a reference to her having martial arts skills, obviously, in the first incarnation of the Matrix movies. And she says then, after displaying that she wanted to do violence to her current husband, she says to Thomas Anderson, and right now, you're probably regretting even sitting down with me. And the Anderson character showing that no, this wasn't a problem for him, her displaying that anger about the false reality that they are in isn't even a thing. It's not a problem for him because they're making a genuine connection about what is going on. He says, contrary to her suggestion that he doesn't even want to be there with her because she displayed that anger, he says, this is the best thing I've done in a long time. Okay? So this is the idea that genuine anger coming forward over the illusion is not a problem for people as long as they are meeting and having the common ground being the truth. And they don't even know that at a conscious level at this point. It's still just at a subconscious level within the matrix. So really great aspects allegorically introduced there. The next scene after their second meeting in the coffee shop is an alarm going off at Thomas Anderson's work building, Deus Machina, and the building is being evacuated by police and FBI agents. While the evacuation of the building is happening, Thomas Anderson gets a text from someone, presumably, we presume, the Morpheus character, and he tells him he says, if you want answers, hello, Neo. He calls him Neo, and he says, if you want answers to your questions, go to the door at the end of the hall. That door is the entrance to a restroom in the building, an employee restroom. And while the building is being evacuated, Anderson follows this text, and he goes into the restroom. And immediately upon entering the restroom, Morpheus emerges from the bathroom stall. And Thomas Anderson looks at him totally incredulously and says, you can't be a character I coded. And the Morpheus program within the Matrix, clearly inserted back into the Matrix by the human beings hacking into the Matrix from their hovercraft, he says, this is all the explanation you need. And he offers him the red pill. And, we might think at this point, Thomas Anderson is starting to wake up. He dumped the blue pills down the drain. He's going to take the red pill now, but that's not how it goes down. He's not ready to fully wake up at this point. And he says, no, no, no. He repeats it over and over. And he doesn't take either the red pill or blue pill. And the Morpheus character says, what do you mean, no? You wanted this. You did this. This was your idea. Meaning, he coded the modal so that Morpheus could be shook and awakened to his true self, coming out of his identity as Agent Smith and emerging as Morpheus, so that then he could subsequently find Neo in the Matrix as the game designer Thomas Anderson. So, again, a little bit complicated of a flow of the story arc to follow, but once you understand it, it's very brilliantly put together. And then Thomas Anderson replies to Morpheus saying, it was a test. It was an experiment. Morpheus then replies, an experiment? You put me in that tiny ass modal and left me to bang my head until I nearly lost my shit searching for you as an experiment? And right after that, when he's still giving him the choice to take the red pill, before that progress could even be made, there's even the possibility of progress being made. And, Thomas Anderson may take the red pill from Morpheus's hands and take it and start to emerge to his true identity as Neo. Agents break in. So we see that continued motif of as soon as any progress is made or is even possible to be made, agents of the system of slavery interject with physical violence because that's all they do. They're order followers who bring violence when they're commanded to do it. That's who the police, the military, and the intelligence agencies are, and that's all they are. A shootout then obviously ensues between Morpheus and the agents of the control system, the agents of the Matrix. And this is one of the scenes where the boss of Deus Machina wakes up to his identity as Agent Smith. Clearly now, Morpheus has woken up from his former identity as Smith in the modal to his true identity as Morpheus. And we see in this scene, he sees an agent's gun laying on the ground. He picks it up and he remembers that he is indeed Agent Smith, the boss of Deus Machina. So he points the gun at, he screams Neo, and he points the gun, or he screams Mr. Anderson, I should say. He points the gun at Thomas Anderson in the office building while his shootout between Morpheus and the agents is taking place, and he pulls the trigger, and we see Thomas Anderson reflecting back on him being shot by the original Agent Smith in the first Matrix and dying before coming back to life, resurrected as Neo to save Trinity. So clearly after this happens, he, if it was the real world, he'd be dead. But since it is a simulation, the next place that he wakes up, where the Thomas Anderson character wakes up, is back in the analyst's office. So it cuts right after he is shot and sees himself as Neo, that he's sitting in the chair at the analyst's office, and the analyst says, I found you at my door. You wandered here and I found you at the door. And here's how the subsequent meeting between Thomas Anderson and the analyst progresses. The analyst says to Anderson, when we started working together, you had lost your capacity to discern reality from fiction. You said you wanted to fly away. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead briefly there. Let me go back. He said, you came to me after trying to jump off a building. You said you wanted to fly away. We have made a lot of progress since then, but you seem particularly triggered right now. Can you tell me how it started? So before we go to his explanation of what happened in the office building, the reference to him jumping off a building is presumably how his relationship with the analyst began. So we see in the scene the flashback to this time when the Thomas Anderson character allegedly stepped off the ledge of an apartment building or an office building. And we see on the right, he doesn't look like himself, and we don't quite know why yet. We'll learn why later on in the film. But essentially, as he's looking off the film, you see there are some window washers right under him. And the woman in front turned looking at him in that frame is Bugs. And she will later tell him how she saw him and what it did, what it triggered in her. So this is what the analyst is referring to. Okay? And here we see the Thomas Anderson character in his false representation with some symbolism as he's standing on the deck of the balcony of that office building. He has a trophy that was given to him as an award for game designer, clearly representing Lucifer / Prometheus, being the light, the one who is a carrier of the light, and trying to bring light to people, and or the dark aspect of Lucifer, that is the one who tries to become God, tries to become like God because of his knowledge, and wields knowledge against others as a weapon. Dual symbol, right? Then we have the dual symbols of the red and blue pills united. So Lucifer is a dual symbol, represented here, Lucifer, Prometheus. The pills are a dual symbol of the red pill representing truth and the blue pill representing falsehood and illusion. Then we have the black box and the white rabbit representing opposite symbology. The white rabbit representing going down the rabbit hole of truth, no matter how strange it becomes. that you have to follow truth into the rabbit hole like in Alice in Wonderland, and no matter how strange that world becomes, you have to continue to pursue truth. And the black box representing mind control and staying in the world of illusion, the tesseract, the hypercube, okay? And the black box also a reference to memory, which is a repeated motif in the film. The black box of an airplane is the memory of events, objective memory of events that take place prior to whatever catastrophe befell the airplane. So lots of symbolism interjected there. So I'll just step back a couple frames to their conversation. And the analyst proceeds, Thomas Anderson, after being asked, how did this episode start, that when you were triggered again, he says to the analyst, Morpheus texted me. And the analyst says, so he's back? And, saying like, well, let me guess, he came to help you escape a virtual reality called the Matrix, right? Then he asks him, if we got in my car right now and drove to your office, what do you think we would find there? And the Thomas Anderson character replies, nothing, because there was no attack. No one was killed. No one texted me. My mind made it all up. Is that what I'm supposed to think? And of course, yes, that's what the analyst wants him to think, because he's trying to feed him the false version of reality that he wants him to accept and believe about himself and keep him firmly anchored in the illusion of the Matrix. The analyst says, is that what you believe? And Anderson says, it felt real. And the analyst continues with his psychobabble analysis of trying to keep Neo anchored into his version of reality. He says, of course it felt real. It was your great ambition to make a game that was indistinguishable from reality. And to achieve that goal, you converted elements of your own life into a narrative. He says, you sublimated anger toward your business partner and cast him as your nemesis. A married woman named Tiffany became the trinity of a doomed romance. It's what artists do. But it becomes a problem when fantasies endanger other people. So we just see that repeated role of the analyst as trying to anchor the Thomas Anderson character in false reality, because he is the psychologist, the social engineer that only wants people to perceive the reality of the control system, of the Matrix, the mind control that they are force feeding them. So this session with the analyst sort of triggers Thomas Anderson to revisit his alleged suicide attempt. As we're going to subsequently learn, the analyst was also lying to him about what happened in that event. So he goes up to the top of a office building again, whether this is Deus Machina or his apartment building, and he prepares to leap off the roof, as he did in previous versions of the Matrix, showing that I can change computer code. I can alter the Matrix at will. I can do things that other people can't within the Matrix that bends the reality and the rules of the Matrix. And he's going to step off the building to prove that to himself, which clearly he's not ready to do. He doesn't have that power yet, or at least he's not in that full power. And he says to himself on the top of the building, readying to step off, he says, free my mind. Either I fly or I fall. Again, another reference to a false choice. He doesn't have to do this now. He doesn't have to try to fly at this point or fall to his death in the Matrix. So that's another reference to a false dialectic at work. And Bugs appears, realizing he's not going to make that jump, not at this point anyway. And she grabs him by, his jacket and pulls him back onto the roof of the building. Then a conversation ensues between them, and Bugs says to Anderson, a long time ago, you changed my life when you leapt off another roof. Back then, I was just like any other copper top. Copper top referencing the battery, the Duracell battery that Morpheus says that this is what the machines want to convert people into, their energy source. So she says, back then I was like any other copper top, pretending my life, again, engaged in the false illusion of the reality that the social engineers give us and the false identities they give us. And she says, until I looked up and saw you, you leapt off and you never fell. You leapt and you never fell. So the analyst was lying to him, okay? He somehow had the ability to, at some point within the matrix, to alter it and change it, and was even remembering who he was before the analyst did the number on him to somehow, as we'll learn in part 2, get him to simply accept the false version of reality and not awaken. So when she pulls him back onto the roof, Bugs also reveals herself as the one who hacked his modal and freed Morpheus from the modal. And she shows him the white rabbit tattoo and is going to ask him to follow her to deeper levels of truth and eventually escape from the Matrix. She also warns him that his office manager, Jude, is a handler program within this version of the Matrix that is used to control and influence him. And he's on the way there, sending agents there. Then Bugs says, I know why you left your modal open. You needed someone else to free Morpheus. And it's because of him that we were able to get to you. If you want the truth, Neo, you're going to have to follow me. And Neo agrees to, quote unquote, follow the white rabbit down the rabbit hole to deeper levels of truth. That's, of course, represented by the doorway that she then presents him on the rooftop and asks him to follow her through. So Anderson agrees to follow her, and Bugs leads him through this doorway, which leads to a moving train portal. She explains to him that when they hack into the Matrix now, they don't need to use these stationary phone booths to move around between it and get in and out. They use moving portals, namely trains. More of the time than not, they use trains because they're moving targets, and it's harder for the machines to track their location if they're on a moving target. So she leads him on board the train where there are many passengers, and then into a bathroom, a restroom on the train, where they go through another doorway and emerge from that second doorway to a stage where Morpheus is waiting for them both, with a scene set up just like the scene where the original Morpheus character, played by Lawrence Fishburne, presented Neo the choice between the red and blue pills. And that the movie sequence is also playing on the screen behind them, because it's clearly a movie theater with a very large stage, or an acting theater with a very large stage. Again, a reference to the Shakespearean line, all the world's a stage and all of us are merely players, engaged in some sort of a false reality. So when Bugs and Thomas Anderson walk through this ripped screen in this theater, showing that the Matrix is a tearing of the veil of reality. It's not the real world. Bugs says to Anderson, after our first contact with you went so badly, we thought that elements from your past might ease you into the present. And Morpheus says to him, nothing comforts anxiety like a little nostalgia. Very true that people will often find comfort in elements of the past if they're having anxiety about the present or the future. And Thomas Anderson says to them both, but if this is real and if I haven't lost my mind, does that mean that these events actually happened? And if they did, then we died, meaning himself and Trinity. So he's wondering, how is he back in the Matrix if he died, right? And Bugs says, obviously not. Obviously they didn't die. The machine somehow kept them alive. And she says, but why the machines kept you alive and why they went to such lengths to hide you are questions we don't currently have answers to. She then tells him, what we didn't understand was that they could alter your digital self-image, what they then subsequently called DSI. Digital self-images how the Matrix and the social engineers of our world can actually get people to see themselves, their own self-image. They could get them to change it at any time by giving them a false version of reality and a false version of themselves. And that's what they're constantly trying to do with all different identity forms, okay? Ego identification in every conceivable way, leading to a smaller and smaller and smaller version of how people see themselves instead of seeing themselves as expanded consciousness. So she says we didn't understand that they could alter your digital self-image through a feedback system called semblance. Again, a false version of self. So she then takes Thomas Anderson to a mirror and she shows him that he looks like another person to everybody in the Matrix. She says, this may be how you see yourself, but this is how everyone else inside the Matrix sees you. And he sees himself as this aging game designer in the mirror. He then asks her, why did it take 20 years to find me, thinking that his appearance somehow represents how much time has passed? And Bugs answers him, it's actually been over 60 years since you and Trinity flew to one of the machine cities. And he says one, and she says, there's a lot we don't know, but based on what we do know, meaning there's obviously more than one machine city. We thought that previously there was only one, but there's many. She says, based on what we do know, it appears that no one found you because you didn't want to be found. This is a reference toward people in the truth movement don't want to come forward. Okay? They want to stay anonymous. They want to stay hidden instead of coming forward with who they are and just speaking the truth bravely and boldly, as we're really truly tasked to do as part of our mission here to end human slavery. Most people don't want to be found. They want to stay anonymous. So Morpheus even suggests many people had thought he went to the dark side and joined with the machines and was helping them. Clearly that wasn't the case, but he told them that's what some people thought of you because you were gone for so long and never came back. And Morpheus says to him, regardless of, what happened and how much time has passed, this is the moment for you to show us what is real. If you want out, meaning out of the Matrix for good, then you'll take this pill. And he shows him the red pill. And then he says, but if you are where you belong, you can go back to this every day, over and over, forever. And then he shows him the blue pill. So once again, the choice is being offered by the Morpheus program to Neo in the Matrix to awaken to the truth or stay firmly entrenched in the fantasy. Anderson immediately reaches for and takes the red pill because he's horrified by the prospect of staying in the Matrix and staying engaged in this false reality. So immediately he takes the red pill from Morpheus's hand and swallows it. And when that happens, when he makes the decision to take the red pill, obviously his location within the Matrix is being traced, and he's going to, eventually his mind will wake up fully out of the false reality, and then they'll be able to track his location and extract his body from his pod. Before that is happening, he is still in a state of flux, and he is looking into the mirror that Bugs brought him to earlier, and he's shifting back and forth between the way he looks to himself and the false digital self-image, or DSI, that he was given by the machines. So this is representative allegorically of, even after first getting the information, the truth represented by the red pill, people don't really necessarily fully come out of their former identity and get involved in the great work of, trying to awaken others, getting fully out of the Matrix through their actions. It's the idea that if you don't take action, you don't really know yourself. You haven't really come to know your true identity and your true purpose, which is what the whole purpose of this film and the question is, and the questions that it answers. Who are you and what is your true purpose? Okay? It's the idea in, old Eastern philosophy. The philosopher Yang Ming said, to know and not to do is not to know. If you, make the claim that you know what's going on and yet you don't really do anything to help truly awaken others and end this condition of human slavery, do you really know? Do you really know yourself? Do you really know what's going on? No, you don't. You're just making a claim that you know, but you don't really know. To know and not to do is not to know. Clearly, after progress has been made, ladies and gentlemen, once again, who breaks in? Agents of the Matrix. The first comes the analyst, okay? Because he's trying to prevent Neo from fully awakening. So the analyst comes through the mirror while this battle in Neo, Thomas Anderson's mind, of his true and false identity are taking place, right? And he's shifting back and forth between his self-images. The analyst comes forward and tries to pull him back through the mirror, back fully into the Matrix, because that's his role. That's his job as a program within the Matrix, to continue to feed him the false reality and keep him anchored inside of the mind control system. So the analyst says to Thomas Anderson, Thomas, none of this is real. You are in the midst of a serious psychotic break. Please feel my hand. This is what is real. Stay with me. And he's clearly lying to him, which is what the dark occultists, the social engineers do to try to anchor us into their version of the false reality that we're living in and tell us it's not slavery. And then he tries to pull him back through the mirror forcibly. Bugs sees this occurring, and she tries to help pull Neo back out of that mirror, out of that illusion that the analyst is pulling him back into. And this represents that Neo isn't strong enough to make the full break from the Matrix himself. This is a very, clear symptom when people first start waking up to the truth because of how horrible the truth actually is of the current human condition. They don't want to see it, and they try to avoid looking at all the horrors that it entails, and they want to go back into the Matrix, into the comfort of illusion and fantasy psychologically. So he still needs help breaking out of that false reality, and Bugs represents the help that he requires by pulling him out of the mirror fully and getting him away from the analyst. And the mirror shatters in a million pieces. Beautiful allegory representing his final break with the fantasy world that the analyst is force-feeding him. The protagonists then narrowly escape to one of their moving train portals in the back doors of the Matrix as agents jump in. Because as soon as the progress is made with the Anderson character fully breaking from the Matrix world and getting away from the analysts with Bugs' help, once again we see the motif of analysts jump in with their violence, represented by the SWAT team. And this is the allegory of that the makers of the film are putting into the movie, that the police and the military are simply agents of violence that show up when any progress is being made from awakening to or getting out of the Matrix. And they are order followers. They are the pets of the elitists. They are the pets of the social engineers, the pets of the dark occult. And all they know how to do is obey their masters and follow orders without conscience, without true knowledge of right and wrong. They're ignoring all of that. They don't willfully act upon conscience. They simply follow orders, which is the opposite of following conscience. Conscience is the objective knowledge of the difference between right and wrong. They're clearly ignoring that by being order followers, and all they know how to do is follow their order and show up when commanded to conduct violence against other people. And I've said over and over again, these agents of the control system of slavery in the real world are not good people. They are all bad people, all of them. And it doesn't matter if they can do small acts of goodness here and there. They're still bad people overall because they're serving an evil system of control, of violence, and of slavery, and they're following the orders to do the violence whenever it is commanded of them. And this is how the dark occultists escape deeper karmic consequence, by getting other people to dirty and bloody their hands for them. And these people are so stupid that they do it. They don't have any holistic intelligence because they don't have awakened heart intelligence. No matter how left-brained intellectual they may be, as is the case with, agents of intelligence agencies or, detectives on police forces. Could they be intellectually advanced in the mind? Yeah, but that doesn't make you holistically intelligent. So these aren't smart people. And I'm going to repeat a new tagline, a comic tagline. In the immortal words of Fred Sanford, I say to all of these order followers, you just dumb, son. You just dumb. From, the legendary Fred Sanford of Sanford and Son. It's going to be one of my new comic taglines in What on Earth is Happening version 3.0, incarnation of the podcast. Because these people aren't holistically intelligent at all. They're dumb. They're dumb people. They're not only bad people, they're bad in all the ways that consciousness fails. Okay? They're not holistically intelligent. They're dumb because they believe that they should be following other people's orders and that they're somehow right for doing that. They're not courageous. They're actually cowards. True courage would be quitting the cult of the control system of slavery and helping to wake people up through moral education, which is the only way that it can be done truly long term. But they're not doing that. And they don't have any real true heart-based care. The sacred feminine dynamic of consciousness is not awakened in them, and they're not doing the right thing. That's not driving them to right action. So they failed in every way you can fail. They're not really truly intelligent. They don't really care about what's true and real. They don't care about truth. They don't care about real justice. They don't care about real objective morality and then properly educating people to that. And they're not doing the right thing. They're not truly courageous, and they're engaged in immoral behavior themselves. That's what makes someone a bad person. Capital B, capital P. Bad person. See, we need to make the true delineation between what is a true good person, capital G, capital P, versus a bad person, capital B, capital P. Look at those things in the true light of what they really are, not in what people previously believed them to be, in an erroneous, mind-controlled mindset and worldview. I need to do a whole show on what truly good people versus truly bad people are. So that's who the Order followers have always represented in all of the films of this franchise. And we see in this scene them coming to conduct their violence at the orders of their masters yet again, when progress is being made by the protagonists. We see a new aspect of Matrix 4 in what is known as swarm mode. When the heroes go into the back room of the Matrix, onto the moving train portal, to then finally get to the place where they could extract Neo fully from the Matrix and locate his body in the real world and get him out of his pod, the passengers are in swarm mode, representing that they are in perfect possession. These are the people under the perfect mind control of the enslavement system of the social engineers in our world. And that's allegorically who they represent. People who have bought the narrative wholesale, and they're not awake at all. As soon as the social engineers switch on a program, their eyes go into Matrix code mode, and one of them is even wearing a Matrix code mask over their face, representing these are the people who blindly believe in the, false narrative of the pandemic. And I love that they inserted that in there as a jab to that. So they go into this swarm mode to fight the heroes, and, they narrowly escape these people raging in swarm mode, and they eventually get Neo to a bathroom mirror on the restroom of the train. But the mirror is so narrow, he doesn't think he can make it through. And this represents that the pathway to truth is a narrow one. It's very narrow to get through to the real world. Okay, he has to force himself through that narrow passageway, narrow straits of morality and truth, brilliantly allegorically depicted by the small mirror. So he also needs help. Again, you see, he can't do it just by a volitional act of his own will. Bugs and the Morpheus program have to push him through the mirror in the Matrix to get him through. Bugs actually says to him, it's just a matter of perspective. The closer you are, the bigger it gets. Meaning that the closer you are to the truth, the more expanded your worldview of reality is. And that's how you escape the Matrix, by acquiring more knowledge of truth of yourself and the world that we live in, and then your perspective will become expansive, and you'll be able to go through that, change in mind, that change of your perspective of reality easier. They finally help push him through, and he emerges to the horror of the real world, that he is, in fact, yet again, embedded in one of the machine's pods, surrounded by the red gelatinous goo that holds him in this cocoon. And he starts to break, that membrane and starts to look around. He has the force feeding tube in his throat that he has to pull out of his mouth, representing the shit and the illusion that he's been force fed, the false reality that he's been force fed since his reinsertion into the Matrix. And he looks around to see the wider perspective of things that is around him. Here is his pod. It's a much larger version of the pod that he was originally in the Matrix. This is clearly a specially designed pod for him. And when he, pulls back his perspective and the camera pulls back and shows you the entirety of the space that this large pod that he is in, of the space that it is in, we see this monstrous construct of these two opposing diodes, if you will, facing each other, and again representing the dialectic, the two false perspectives, the two false versions of reality, each person, each aspect being held in this mindset. Another thing I neglected to mention is when he's in the analyst scenes, you see the butterfly behind him. This is also could be representative of that butterfly pattern as well. That's Monarch mind control programming reference. I should have alluded to it when I was at the analyst scenes, but check the scenes with the analyst. He has a Monarch butterfly behind him, okay, in a case. And that's a clear reference to the Monarch mind control programs, who was conducted by dark occultists and social engineers and intelligence agencies, and a reference to who the analyst is yet again. Here, these pods are clearly designed for him and Trinity. And he doesn't yet know that Trinity's in the other one, but he suspects it. But when the machines show up and fully disconnect him from his tubes, from his feeding tubes and his information, connections to the Matrix false reality, he confirms as they're taking him away that yes, indeed, Trinity is the other person in the other pod. So they kept her alive and reinserted her into the Matrix as well, obviously. So after seeing Trinity, confirming that it's her, Neo is brought back on board. By the way, here, Trinity repeats this motif of an attempt at genuine connection, right? They were clearly being held apart in their pods, respectively, in their respective pods. But here, she tries to raise her hand up out of her pod, is unable to do it because she is not yet at the point of mentally escaping the Matrix and remembering who she is and her purpose. But she attempts to lift her hand when looking at Neo and cannot, and it slips back down into the cocoon. Neo then is taken to a human hover ship, and he is dying from extraction shock from the Matrix. The ship's doctor tries to shock him back to life by plugging him into what we saw in the first movie, the Construct, the program that you could load other teaching programs into to learn a skill. So he has to be shocked back to reality in the Construct. He meets Morpheus in the Construct, who says to him, "I've been chilling here in the ship network, learning all about you and me." And he asks him some questions about ontology. He says, "Are memories turned into fiction any less real?" Referencing the Matrix games. His memories were turned into fictional games in the Matrix. Does that make the memories any less real? Is reality based in memory? He goes on to ask him, "Nothing but fiction." So if you have a memory of something, but it's based in a fantasy, does that make it any less real to you? Ontological questions. Then Morpheus says to Neo, "As to my role in all of this, my best guess is that you wrote me as an algorithmic reflection of two forces that helped you become you, Morpheus and Agent Smith. a combo pack of counter programming that was, let's just say, a little more than crazy making. But it worked because here we are. And now the bad news. Your brain is hooked on this shit the Matrix has been force feeding you for years. Hooked bad. Again, that's why he's dying. He's not fully ready to accept the reality of the real world. Again, the social engineers did a number on his mind. That's what they do to people in our world and why they're so resistant to awakening. They see it as ego death, and they don't want to awaken to the reality that we are really embedded in. And he says, you're going through major withdrawal, but I know exactly what you need. And then Morpheus produces in the construct a simulated martial arts arena, martial arts dojo fighting arena. Neo is reluctant to fight Morpheus again, and he doesn't really want to engage him in this. But Morpheus says this could be the first day of the rest of your life. But if you want it, you got to fight for it. And Neo is in this mindset of, no, I'm done fighting, he says. He's in this new age mindset where we don't have to really fight for this. It's just about changing our mind and our emotions, and then we get what we want. Action isn't going to be required. Fighting isn't going to be required. Morpheus says, are you done fighting? And then he attacks Neo, who does not defend himself and is really getting beat badly by Morpheus. He's hurting him. He's kicking his ass. And Morpheus says to Neo, oh yeah, they taught you good. They made you believe their world was all you deserved, meaning slavery is all you deserved. And he says, but some part of you knew that was a lie. Some part of you remembered what was real. Neo begins fighting back, although not very strongly, and he says, you don't know me. And Morpheus says, I do know you, because I know the only thing that still matters to you, of course, talking about Trinity and his love for her, okay, and ultimately love of truth, and his desire to fight for truth. And he says, I know it's why you're here, it's why you're still fighting, and it's why you will never give up. This is it. This is your last chance. You got to fight for your goddamn life if you want to see Trinity again. Neo, fight for her. And upon saying those words to Neo finally found the gift of sacred anger, the sacred gift of anger that he has to activate to truly begin doing what is right and truly functioning normally again in the real world. So upon Neo becoming very, very angry, he hits Morpheus with incredible explosive power, which overloads the entire construct that they are fighting in. And it explodes it. And so he comes out of the construct program after this tremendous explosion of his power, representing he has finally found his strength, his will to act, his courage to act in the real world. And then his body finally resumes normal function. And he remains alive. He is no longer in danger of dying in the real world. He then wakes up on board the human hovercraft, captained by Bugs. And Bugs enters Neo's recovery room to speak with him. She says to Neo, how are you doing? And he says to her, they took my life and turned it into a video game. How am I doing? I don't know. I don't even know how to know. Not knowing how to know, a reference to epistemology. How do we know what we know? That's the epistemological methods. That's what would involve truth discovery methodologies such as the trivium. It's part of epistemology. So she's referencing epistemology here. And Bugs says back to him, that's just it, isn't it? If we don't know what's real, we can't resist. We can't recover from mind control and fight against a system of slavery if we don't even have the tools to know what's real. That's the epistemological tool set of the trivium. Grammar, logic, rhetoric, knowledge, understanding, wisdom. We have to put that tool set to work if we're going to know the truth. She says they took our story, something that meant so much to people like me, and turned it into something trivial. That's what the Matrix does. It weaponizes every idea, every dream, everything that's important to us. And this is a reference not to the bad form of dreaming of illusion, but positive dreams, aspirations, what we want to use our will to do in the real world to improve it. And it's also a reference to the weaponization of Christianity, since this is a Christian allegory and there's an esoteric aspect to Christianity in the form of seeing the Jesus figure of the New Testament as Christ consciousness. They have weaponized that by turning it into a religion that then turns off people to the deeply seated allegory in true esoteric Christianity, and seeing the Christ figure of the New Testament biblically as that allegory of higher consciousness. So that's been weaponized as well. She says, where better to bury truth than inside is something as ordinary as a video game? And that's something that's done in the real world, in our world. They put the allegories in movies and video games such as The Matrix. Okay? And, they're burying the truth there instead of having people learn it outright directly. Neo says, that sounds like the Oracle. And Bugs replies, I heard so much about her, but she was gone before I was free. When this new version of The Matrix was uploaded, there was a purge. Neo says, they promised us peace and they gave us a purge. And she says, no, there was peace. You made that possible and it changed everything. And then Neo, feeling like someone who has done a lot of work for very little change in the world, says it doesn't feel like anything changed. The Matrix is the same or worse, and I'm back to where I started. It feels like everything we did was for nothing, and like none of it mattered. She says all of it mattered, and I can show you. Neo then and Bugs leave the room, and they enter the bridge of the Mnemosyne, the ship that they're on, which means the goddess of memory in Greek. And it could also, mnemonic means memory, and sign or scene is the root of similar. Okay? So this could mean the name of the hovercraft is not only the Greek goddess of memory, but it means those who have shared memory or similar memory. They've awakened and remembered who they really are. There's also a reference to the Bible on the top, Mark 3. It's just not the mark or number of the ship. It's Mark 3, which is Mark chapter 3, and number 19 is verse 19. I don't have that handy, but you could look it up to see what it says. Made in the year 2274 EU, presumably European Union. Neo meets the crew of the Mnemosyne hovercraft, and they have a brief conversation. And, one of them is even introduced as the Neologist, who is obsessed with Neo and his life and knows everything about what he did. But the main takeaway of this scene is Neo asks, machines are on our side now? Because there are machines that helped rescue him from the physical matrix, namely the large one which carried him away, and I believe the small one unhooked him. So he says, machines are on our side? And Bugs replies, they're synthients. That's the word they prefer to machines. Your contact with the Synthiot city caused a huge impact on their world, and that's what I meant. That what you changed that nobody believed could ever be changed, the meaning of our side. They risked their lives to help you. And Neo thanks them, but then asks them, but why? And then Morpheus replies in his exomorphic particle codex form in the real world, existing as this particle codex, not all seek to control, just as not all wish to be free. So seeing that some people on the other side are willing to help, and not all human beings want to be free. Very powerful allegory. Human beings want slavery because they don't want the personal responsibility that goes hand in hand with freedom. Neo asks the machines about Trinity and learns that one of them has already been exiled for going into the space where he was held, and they don't know of a way to get her out yet. They then take him to the machine city of Io, representing in-out in computer terms, and they proceed connection, another reference to connection, and they proceed to a landing pad where they expect a not warm welcome. The crew disembarks from that hovercraft onto the landing pad, and they encounter General Niobe, who gave Neo the hovercraft, the Logos, in the first part of the trilogy. And she's very upset that he is here now. She's not happy about it. And unfortunately, that's going to be all the time that we're going to have to cover part 1. This is going to involve the much longer breakdown. So we'll continue this in part 2 of the Matrix trilogy, the Matrix 4 Resurrections Decoded, right here on What on Earth is Happening next week. Thank you very much for listening, for watching, everyone. Remember, government is slavery. We'll see you right here next week.